Sit down or get thrown off this plane." The cabin erupted in gasps. Flight attendant Maya Collins stood her ground, her fists clenched. "You have no right to talk to me like that," she snapped, her voice cutting through the tense air. The furious businessman slammed his tray table shut. "I paid for this seat. I don't take orders from some low-class—" "Enough!" The captain's voice boomed from the cockpit. But what the man didn't realize? By the time this flight landed, he'd be the one begging for mercy. What happens next? You won't believe it. The atmosphere inside Flight 374 was buzzing with the usual mix of excitement and exhaustion. The warm glow of overhead lights illuminated the cabin as passengers settled into their seats, some scrolling through their phones, others adjusting their pillows in preparation for the long-haul journey from New York to Los Angeles. Among them was Maya Collins, a 30-year-old flight attendant with years of experience handling difficult passengers. She wore her neatly pressed uniform with pride, her natural curls pulled back into a sleek bun. Her deep brown eyes scanned the cabin with practiced ease, ensuring every passenger was comfortable. Maya loved her job, not because it was glamorous, but because it gave her a chance to make people's journeys easier. She had worked hard to get here, juggling night classes while working double shifts at a diner just to afford flight attendant training. Her dream was simple: to travel, to see the world, and to be respected for the job she did. But tonight, that respect was about to be tested in a way she never imagined. In first class, a man sat with an air of entitlement, legs stretched out arrogantly across the aisle. Martin Langford, a wealthy hedge fund manager in his late 40s, adjusted the cuff of his tailored suit, barely acknowledging the people around him. He was used to getting what he wanted, when he wanted. Maya had noticed him immediately, the type of passenger who saw flight attendants not as professionals, but as servants. She had dealt with men like him before, loud, dismissive, and quick to pull rank when things didn't go their way. As Maya moved down the aisle, assisting passengers with their carry-ons, she overheard Martin's irritated voice. "Are you kidding me?" he scoffed, tossing his menu onto the tray table. "This is not what I ordered." She turned to see him glaring at the meal he had just been served. The other first-class passengers glanced his way, but quickly looked back down, not wanting to get involved. "Sir, is there a problem?" Maya asked, keeping her tone professional. Martin barely looked at her. "Yeah, there's a problem. I asked for the filet mignon, and this—" He motioned toward his plate with a sneer. "Isn't filet mignon. This is some rubbery excuse for food." Maya remained composed. "I'm sorry for the mix-up, sir. Let me check with the kitchen to see if we have any more left." He cut her off, waving his hand dismissively. "You know what? Forget it. I swear you people can't do anything right." The air in the cabin tensed. The words lingered like an invisible slap, hitting Maya harder than she expected. You people. She could feel the weight of every eye on her. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably. Others, she knew, agreed with him but wouldn't say it out loud. Her jaw clenched, but she reminded herself of her training. Stay calm. Stay professional. Don't let him win. "Sir," she said evenly, "I'd appreciate it if you could be respectful." Martin let out a short, cruel laugh. "Respectful? Oh, I see what this is. You think you're important because you get to wear a little uniform and walk up and down an aisle handing out drinks." Her fists clenched at her sides, but she didn't react. Not yet. Martin leaned back in his seat, enjoying the power he felt over her. "Let me guess. You probably got this job because of some diversity quota, right? And now you think you can tell me how to behave?" A few gasps rippled through the cabin. Maya could feel her pulse thudding in her ears. Her instincts screamed at her to snap back, to put this man in his place, but she knew that's exactly what he wanted. Before she could respond, a deep voice from a few rows back broke the silence. "Hey," the voice said firmly, "that's enough." Maya turned to see Daniel Brooks, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his mid-50s, watching Martin with calm but unwavering intensity. He was dressed simply, a military veteran's cap resting atop his head. The look in his eyes was one of experience, of having seen too much, of knowing exactly the kind of man Martin was. Martin scoffed. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" Daniel didn't flinch. "Someone who's tired of watching guys like you act like the rules don't apply to them." A ripple of agreement moved through the first-class cabin. Some passengers nodded while others, too afraid to speak, simply watched, waiting to see what would happen next. Martin's jaw tightened, realizing he was no longer in control of the situation. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but there wasn't one. Maya took a slow breath, regaining her composure. She looked Martin dead in the eye. "Sir," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I think it's time for you to calm down, or I'll have to call the captain." Martin froze. For the first time that night, he felt powerless. He wasn't used to being put in his place, especially by a black woman and a black veteran. But this was only the beginning, because what neither Maya nor Martin knew was that this flight was about to take an unexpected turn, and by the time they landed, justice would be served in a way Martin Langford never saw coming. The first-class cabin of Flight 374 had gone eerily quiet. The confrontation between Maya Collins, the black flight attendant, and Martin Langford, the entitled CEO, had already set the entire cabin on edge. But now, with Daniel Brooks, the black veteran, stepping in, the situation had reached a boiling point. Maya could feel every eye on her, but she remained calm. She had to. But Martin, he wasn't done. "You think you can threaten me?" Martin scoffed, his voice laced with venom. "You have no idea who I am. I could have you fired before this plane even lands." Maya inhaled sharply, but before she could speak, Daniel took a step forward. "Is that right?" Daniel's voice was steady, but there was an undeniable edge to it. He folded his arms, his military cap slightly tilting forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a man who's just realized he doesn't have as much power as he thought." Martin's face twisted with rage. "Do you know how much I make in a year?" He spat, gesturing around as if his wealth should shield him from accountability. "More than you two could dream of. I've stayed in hotels worth more than this damn plane." Maya clenched her fists. This was always how it went. Men like Martin didn't see people like her as equals. She was just the help. And Daniel? In Martin's eyes, he was just another old man who didn't know his place. But before Maya could respond, the situation took a dangerous turn. "Sir, I'm asking you one last time to lower your voice," Maya said, her voice firm but professional, "or I'll have to report this to the captain." Martin laughed, a cold, arrogant laugh. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only Maya and Daniel could hear. "You think the captain gives a damn about you?" His lip curled. "You're replaceable, disposable." That was it. Maya wasn't going to let him walk over her. But before she could speak, Martin did something that sent a shockwave through the cabin. He reached for Maya's wrist. The touch wasn't hard, but it was enough. Enough to make Maya's breath hitch. Enough to make Daniel's eyes narrow. Enough to make everyone watching gasp in horror. "You do not put your hands on my crew," came a sharp, authoritative voice from behind. Captain Ryan Mitchell. The entire cabin turned as the tall, broad-shouldered pilot stood in the aisle, his piercing blue eyes locked onto Martin with a look that could cut through steel. Martin blinked, momentarily stunned. "Captain, Save it," Captain Mitchell snapped. "You're a disruptive passenger, and I will not tolerate it. We're at 30,000 feet in the air, and this is not your boardroom." Martin's arrogance faltered, but only for a moment. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed, straightening his tie. She was being unprofessional. Maya's heart pounded, but she refused to look away. Captain Mitchell crossed his arms. "Mr. Langford, I have two options for you. You either sit down, shut up, and behave like an adult, or we divert this plane, and you'll be escorted off in handcuffs when we land." A few passengers murmured in approval. The tables had turned. Martin's nostrils flared. He wasn't used to being challenged, not by staff, not by a pilot, not by a woman. "I will be filing a complaint," he hissed through gritted teeth. "Feel free," Captain Mitchell replied coolly, "but just know, we have multiple witnesses and security cameras on this plane." For the first time, a flicker of realization dawned in Martin's eyes. He had been recorded. Passengers were holding up phones, capturing every second of his entitled meltdown. Martin slumped into his seat, seething. His ego had been shattered. Maya turned away, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She met Daniel's gaze, and for the first time that evening, she allowed herself a small, grateful smile. But just when it seemed like the tension had finally died down, a voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a passenger disturbance, we have been cleared for an unscheduled landing at Denver International Airport. Law enforcement will be waiting at the gate." Martin's face drained of color. "Wait, what?" His head snapped up in horror. "You can't be serious." "Oh, we're serious," Captain Mitchell said, his tone unyielding, "and you'll have plenty of time to think about that when you're explaining yourself to the authorities." Passengers burst into quiet cheers and applause. One even called out, "Enjoy your last first-class flight, buddy." Maya fought the urge to smirk, but she couldn't stop the warmth in her chest. Justice. Finally. As the plane began its descent, Martin sat rigid in his seat, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. He had humiliated himself, and now the entire world was about to see it. As Flight 374 touched down at Denver International Airport, a heavy silence filled the cabin. Martin Langford, once smug and untouchable, now sat rigid in his seat, his face pale as he processed what was happening. Outside the plane's window, he could see the flashing red and blue lights of airport security. His fate was sealed. Maya, still standing tall, took a deep breath. She felt the weight of what had just transpired, but more than anything, she felt vindicated. She turned to Daniel, who gave her a small, knowing nod. "You okay?" he asked, his voice calm but concerned. Maya exhaled. "I will be." She wasn't just talking about today. She was talking about every day before this. As the doors to the plane finally opened, 2 security officers stepped inside. "Mr. Langford?" one of them asked, his expression neutral but firm. Martin swallowed hard. He opened his mouth, probably to argue, to threaten, to throw his wealth and influence around like he always did. But the words never came, because at that moment, he knew. There was nothing he could say to fix this. The cameras were still rolling. Social media had already exploded with clips of his meltdown. His company's PR team was probably in full crisis mode right now, scrambling to clean up a mess he couldn't talk his way out of. One of the passengers leaned over and whispered, just loud enough for Martin to hear, "Enjoy your last first-class flight, pal." Laughter rippled through the cabin. For the first time, Martin wasn't the most powerful person in the room, and it terrified him. As the officers led him off the plane, the applause erupted. Maya felt her heart pound, not with fear, but with relief. This time, justice had actually won. After everyone disembarked, Maya finally stepped onto solid ground. The cool night air filled her lungs, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again. Daniel, waiting just outside, gave her a small smirk. "You handled yourself well back there." Maya let out a tired laugh. "I've had practice." Daniel studied her for a moment before reaching into his wallet. "You ever think about doing something bigger? More than just taking orders from men like him?" Maya frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel handed her a business card. "I run a security firm. We need people who can think fast, stay calm under pressure, and stand up for what's right. You ever decide you want to change? Give me a call." Maya stared at the card, her heart pounding with something new. Hope. For so long, she had endured. Now, she had a choice. She looked up at Daniel and smiled. "I just might." Sometimes karma doesn't wait. Men like Martin think they can do whatever they want until the world finally pushes back. And people like Maya, they rise. Because power isn't about money. It's about dignity, respect, courage. And that's something no amount of money can buy. What do you think? Drop a comment below. Subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful stories like this. Because in the end, the truth always wins. Truth.